and welcome to DeepDive Talent Insights and Analytics channel. This is I Think I Love My Job. If you're new and you don't know me, I am Kalifa Oliver, the resident expert here at DeepDive at all things employee experience. What are we going to talk about today? Data. Specifically, we're going to talk about qualitative and quantitative data and when to use closed versus open-ended questions or even focus groups when you're trying to collect employee data. Let's go. So often when I am doing a consult with a client or a partner and they're like, Kalifa, I need a survey, my first question is often, but do you though? It is really important to understand when you do need a survey or when you should do a focus group. It is also important to understand when you need open text on your survey, and that may be more helpful. Or when a survey can just be closed-ended, which is usually faster. That just means that you ask a question, you have a scale, they select an answer. First, let's talk about when we want to choose to use a survey versus a focus group or some other type of research method. When you are trying to get to a lot of people very fast and you want very specific information, a survey is your best bet. A survey gives you greater reach, it gives you quick feedback, it's easier to analyze, and it is easier to report. In some cases, you are trying to make a decision that is very nuanced and complex, and it requires more information from people than what the person or people or vendor who may be responsible for building a survey can give. You want that additional robust information that you typically would not have if you told somebody, here are the items, choose an answer. You want more color, more adjectives, you want more descriptors, you are trying to design, for example, your vision or your values, you want to understand your culture better. When you are really trying to dig into an idea or concept or trying to think through it, that is where you need a focus group or another sort of research method than just a survey. Additionally, when you're asking a very small group of people about something very specific and you just want feedback, so maybe you just need to ask the 5 people in the office, do you want coffee? You can send a survey, it's completely fine. you can do that. But if you wanted to know about the feelings about culture and reaction to leadership, then unless they're very specific variables that you are trying to get to or very specific information that you need to have, again, focus group. Focus groups are more labor intensive, they require training. Your focus group is only as good as your facilitator, because you have to remember in focus groups sometimes the loudest person leads the conversation. The person who's willing to say the most or speak first is usually the person who guides the entire direction of your focus group. So you want to be very careful with a focus group. Additionally, if you are doing research that might require a focus group, you really need to have multiple focus groups. If it's something where you're trying to understand something technical or something process driven like a role, you want to make sure that you're asking people of different skill levels. You want to ask people who have been there for different time. A secret that a lot of people don't think about because it's counterintuitive is often if you're trying to understand a process Somebody who is new to the job is usually the best person to ask. When you ask the person who've been there a long time and have the most experience, a lot of times their brain has moved into shortcuts, so they can't necessarily describe every little thing they do. You do want what they say, and you do want the value of the expertise, but you also want to make sure you have a nice mix of people. So tip. Now, there is another way to collect data from multiple people that might give you some more perspective, especially when you don't have a lot of time and you need to collect a lot of it and quickly, and that is using open text questions. Here are some rules for open text questions. Remember that open text questions means that the survey, the time to complete the survey, is going to be longer. So you typically don't want to ask a whole bunch of open text questions on a survey unless it's absolutely necessary. If you find that you have 4 or 5 plus open text questions on a survey, you might need a focus group. Open text questions also need to be very specific yet broad. Let me explain. A lot of people, when they write an open text question, they will say something like, do you have anything more that you'd like to share? I could share anything. Right? So you want to get at specific information. So you want to ask very specifically what you'd like to hear about. So for example, is there anything else that you would like to share with us about leadership? Is there anything else that you would like to share with us about your experience at this organization? Is there anything else you would like to share with us about how you use technology? That is more directed. It's broad enough that it's not leading, and somebody could put multiple things that they may not have been able to share in the actual closed-ended questions, but you really don't need to just throw in anything else. Think about your analyst. Open text questions do offer rich and robust additional data. They also inform changes that can be made on a survey tool, an assessment tool down the line, if trends and patterns keep showing that this is something that is important. The thing though is, if you don't intend to actually do anything with the open text data, and I'm talking about sentiment analysis or machine learning or natural language processing, to make some sort of decision to refer to employee relations, to escalate to an allegations or investigative group, to share with leaders, to give a regulator. If you're not doing anything like that with it, then don't frustrate your employees. Don't frustrate them. If you leave an open box for people to share information, you would be surprised at how seriously people take that box. You have an obligation, once you put it there, to do something with it. I just alluded to it a bit, but bear in mind that if you put an open text question on a survey, I usually recommend just one. If you put open text or multiple or one, again, I recommend one. You have to understand that it's not easy to analyze open text data. It's qualitative data, and as rich and as robust as it is also not simple to report. It also means that your reporting time to give a report to a stakeholder is a little bit longer, because you have to model the data, you have to make sense of it, you have to look at themes and sentiments based on the goals of the research. So time to complete analysis is longer. Bear all of that in mind when you're trying to decide what you need to do. Now, we talked about open text, so let's kind of briefly talk about closed-ended. Closed-ended is what you know. How do you feel about X? Strongly agree to strongly disagree. I will refer my friends or family to this. 0 to 10. Those are questions with a scale. Those need to be very specific and clear questions, and I've talked more about that on my video about surveys. They have to be very clear, They have a scale, bing, bam, boom, you fill it out, you close it up. It's faster, especially if you don't be switching up those scales, but we talked about that. And you get a lot more done very quickly. When you don't have a lot of time and you have an idea of what you need to ask, or you have historical data that you need some sort of trending on, that is it, and that is best. That is most typical of what you will find. That's most typical of what you'll get from a vendor. That's most typical of off-the-shelf tools. So you typically will have closed-ended when anybody thinks about a survey. That's generally the direction in which they go. It's your fastest option, your best option, your simplest option. So to recap, things you have to think about when trying to decide if you want just quantitative, closed text, or qualitative data, open text, or focus groups. You need to make the decision on how long do you have to report, how much time do you have for analysis, how clear the goals are, how deep do you need to go, how much information you actually need, if you're buying the tool, if it's a vendor tool, are you creating it yourself, what are you asking about. All of these things to think about before you make that decision as to how you're going to fashion your tool. Know that when you're trying to understand information, there's not always one thing that you need to do. For example, you can ask closed-ended questions, and then you might find that there are strange patterns where questions you ask, for example, about leadership are very low. So the next time you ask, you might throw in an open text to see if you capture anything else. You might have an open text question and you found some interesting things coming up and interesting concepts coming up that you want to really dig into. And you might decide, you know what, we need some focus groups after that. Focus groups are usually tied more to action when you get to that stage where you want to do something. Now, remember, as much as people get sick of surveys, and I've talked about this, again, they get survey fatigue, they get inaction fatigue, they get even more inaction fatigue if you take them into a focus group and do nothing with it. Focus groups require a lot more energy, a lot more of a time commitment. They actually cost your business more because it's more time that you're taking people away from doing their day-to-day job to do this stuff. And it's important enough to do that, but if you're gonna do it, you need to commit to why you're doing it and the outcomes of it. So the rule of all of this is be very, very clear about what your goals are, what your needs are, what you're trying to find out, and then listen away. That is it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion about data. I'm sure we'll have many more discussions about data many times to come. I know one of the things I've been asked already is about analyses and types of analyses that you should do, under which circumstance, and what is the best thing to do. I am here to talk about that, and I will in another episode down the road. But if you are making any of these decisions related to survey and measurement and qualitative and quantitative data and closed and open text, I hope this is helpful. If you have any comments or questions or thoughts or ideas, please don't forget to put it down below. I am more than willing to read it and discuss it. Don't forget, if you like what you've seen and heard, please subscribe to this channel. Well, it was nice as always, and don't forget, there is always room to have a brilliant experience. Bye.